Hi everyone, welcome back. This is going to be a review of the Bohemian Gothic Tarot by Baba Studio. This was my working deck for February, and I will not be doing a complete walkthrough. I just wanted to share my thoughts on the deck after using it for a full month. Now this was a Christmas gift, and before that, I would say this was at the very, very bottom of my wish list. And the only reason that it was even on my wish list was that I had just heard so many great things about this deck. And it made me wonder what I was missing out on and what I just wasn't seeing in this deck, because as it was, the imagery just did not appeal to me in the least. And so I was never really attracted to the deck, but still decided to put it on my wish list. For FOMO, basically. In a previous video, I had discussed my failed attempts to bond with the Tarot of Vampires. I was looking for a darker themed deck that I could use for both light and shadow, that I didn't have to limit to just shadow work. And I thought Tarot of Vampires could be that deck, and it wasn't. And people began recommending the Bohemian Gothic, saying that you could definitely use it for every day, and it's so funny, and it's so it's got such a sense of humor. And so I bumped it to the top of my wish list. This is supposed to be a deck that is complementary to the RWS system. It's got this beautiful sturdy box that I'm sure many of you have seen. A little white book, and here are the backs. It's beautiful. It's very pretty, and I've heard so many good things about the cardstock, the Baba Studio cardstock, that it's bendy for us riffle shufflers, but at the same time it's sturdy because there's some fortified core. I'm not quite sure, but the cardstock definitely met my expectations. Very nice. Now in this deck, even though, like I said, I'm not really into this style of imagery, this, I guess like photo manipulated imagery, I did think that some of the cards were quite lovely. So I'll start off by showing you some of those. So here we have the Eight of Cups. I've mentioned many times before that the Eight of Cups is one of my favorite minors in the tarot deck, and I do like this rendition. I like that you can see her face. I like the leading up of the stairs into the unknown. So that was nice. Four of Swords, also very nice. I love the contrast of the deep red against the darker hues in this card. The Wheel of Fortune. How can you not love a card that shows someone getting their cards read? And the moonlight coming in from the window. So this was one of my favorites. The Star. The Moon. I love the wolf and the woman. She looks very regal. Thought this was a pretty card as well. I do love the use of colors in this deck. The lighter or brighter colors juxtaposed to the darker hues of the background. Ten of Swords. Now usually the Ten of Swords, you have the impaled figure, and this to me was a more gentler rendition of the Ten of Swords, which is ironic given that this is a pretty dark deck. But instead of the impaled figure, you have a scene of mourning. But I love that you have this break in the clouds with the sun peeking through. So I enjoyed that a lot. The Fool. I thought this was really playful, and I really did like this. The Fool card is neither here nor there for me. I mean, I love the meaning of the card, but in terms of the traditional image itself and other images I've seen, it's just okay. But this one I would say is one of my favorite Fool cards that I have seen in any deck. The World. And Strength, another beautiful card. I think she is just badass. I love the wings. I love her expression. I love her posture up against the lion, also beautiful. And the rich red of her gown. What's sad about this card is that the lion is chained. So while it's a beautiful card, it's also a kind of a difficult card for me to sit with. And likewise, so this is a little bit more of a graphic card in terms of animal suffering. So those of you who are a little bit sensitive to that might want to skip this part. But the Three of Swords is another difficult card for me because you have the dove that has died. So this one is not a favorite of mine just because it's so sad. And then you have the cards that just creeped me the fuck out, honestly. I would say that the Tower, this one is one of the creepiest. Just the gaping mouth of this figure and just everything about it, it just makes me shudder. And I guess maybe that, given that it's the Tower, I mean, I guess that makes it a pretty effective card, but yeah, shudder. The Seven of Wands. Now, people talk about how hilarious this card is, and I don't know, I think he's ugly, and I don't like him, and yeah, creeps me out. Creeps me out. Same with this one. I would say this is like the second creepiest card next to the Tower. This dude right here, I mean, need I say more? Just makes me uncomfortable. I usually love the Hermit, but you know, he's hard to look at. His face is just pretty hard to look at. And then this one right here, this guy and the dog, they're just really menacing. And once again, I mean, these are the types of cards that make me wonder why, it made me wonder why people thought this was such a hilarious deck. Now, there were a couple cards that I did find funny, so I'll show you those. The Four of Wands. I mean, the expression on these women's faces, very amusing. But again, you know, this guy up here creeped me out. So, kind of a mix of emotions with that card. This one I found funny because he just reminded me of Willem Dafoe with bat ears. And I don't know if some of you remember that Willem Dafoe was in a movie where he played the actor who was famous for playing Nosferatu. So, and I've never seen that movie, but I do recall that he was the star of that movie, and you saw him as Nosferatu, and so I had that association, and so I did find that funny because Willem Dafoe and like huge baby, just proportionately to me, I'm like, that's a huge baby. Maybe it's not even a baby. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. A Nine of Cups. Again, maybe one of like my favorite Nine of Cups that I've seen lately, because you don't have the man spread. If anything, he has crossed his legs, and he's drinking absinthe. So I thought that was pretty funny. And then this one, reminiscent of the Headless Horseman. So I enjoyed this. So while I did find some cards funny, on the whole, I would still say in the beginning I didn't I didn't see how the deck in its entirety was one people could classify as being really funny and having a sense of humor. But, this was something to explore during my month of working with the deck. And I started off with a deck interview, which actually turned out wonderful. It gave me, it was a great interview, and I did some spreads. Some of them I posted on Instagram, and again, wonderful readings. So the little white book is pretty standard. I mean, it gives you some spreads. It gives you kind of a standard RWS meaning, and then it gives you also the shadow or hidden meanings. But ultimately, what I found that was more helpful to me was downloading the app, which I didn't know existed until around the time I started working with this deck. Someone on Facebook mentioned that there was an app for the Bohemian Gothic. And that was very helpful in my learning this deck, because not only did it provide what's in here, it also provided the backstory behind what's depicted in each card. So you actually know what's happening, as opposed to just, relying on these more vague, broad meanings that you get in any little white book. So I used that app to learn more about the cards. And really that app, when it gives you the story behind each image and what's going on in that image, it really does focus on the dark and the shadow. I mean, it is a Gothic deck. And so once again, I found myself wondering, okay, how are people using this as just like an everyday deck? Because the app is definitely focusing more on the dark side. The images in nature are pretty dark. As the month progressed, I learned to reframe my perspective, reframe the way I perceived this world of the Bohemian Gothic. And I began to look at this kind of macabre world, this Gothic world, as being the norm. That was my approach. Like, okay, if I'm going to delve into this world, it has to be with the idea that this is the norm. This is the everyday. And so then, when I would get a card like this, which with standard RWS meaning is supposed to be a pretty positive and light card, and you're seeing this image, which to me isn't light at all, through changing my perspective, I was able to say to myself, okay, well, this creepy dude right here and this dog, they're not actually creepy. I mean, they're not going to lure this couple in, and the dog is not going to dismember them, and then the guy is not going to have them for dinner or anything. He's going to invite them in for a spot of tea, and he's going to help them out, and it's going to be good times. So that was kind of one way, just one example of changing my perspective. So then another card here, Four of Wands, once again, usually a happy card, a positive card. This guy, this sinister dude up here, no, not sinister. I mean, the creepy expressions on their faces, not creepy at all. They're just super, super happy to be there. And this dude, he's just, he's Lord of the Manor and overlooking his property and just making sure that things are going well and people are having a good time. He's not out to kidnap anyone and murder them. Not at all. It's completely fine. It's all good. Creepy hermit dude? Not creepy, no. I mean, he might be a little tired, might have some bags under his eyes, but he's been on a journey, and he will find his solitude. He will be able to to attain what he's after, that introspection. He will be guided by the moon and his lantern, and he'll be fine, and it's gonna be fine. And this is just a wonderful reminder of seeking that introspection, seeking that inner light. So those were just some examples of how I personally chose to work with this deck to reframe my perspective and my mindset into how I entered this world. And I thereby did see the sense of humor. I did see the hilarity and the light in some of the cards that traditionally are supposed to be lighter in meaning. I was able to find that balance of the light and the shadow. I found that my work with this deck in February, while challenging, I appreciated the challenge because I learned so much. I stepped outside the box. I stepped outside my comfort zone and really learned a lot about how to just refocus and make my perspective more malleable. So while I did have a good time with this deck and I learned a lot, I think the question remains, and time will tell, whether I will reach for this deck and want to reach for this deck. Because as it is, while I valued what each image had to offer me, there was so much to look at and to work with in each image, which I loved. I would still say that the aesthetic of this deck was not one that I warmed up to. That's where I am with this deck. Maybe come next fall around Halloween, I'll be called to pull it out again. And I'm gonna keep it for now because, like I said, I enjoyed that this is kind of outside the box for me. And I don't want to just dismiss it so quickly just because I'm still not in love with the imagery. But yeah, I'm going to keep reassessing, keep revisiting to see whether this is a deck that I'm truly meant to keep or not. Thank you for hanging out with me in this review. If you have the Bohemian Gothic or are planning to get this deck, please do let me know your thoughts and drop a comment below. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.